Hi folks, you're at Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about what can only be described as the stunning success of the globalists and their prosecutors, the Soros-owned type prosecutor, their stunning success in getting favourable verdicts for themselves in jury trials. Now, it's different when you've got an activist judge and an activist prosecutor working in tandem, which is very much the case in many legal jurisdictions now across the Western world. And you can get a guilty verdict or any verdict you want. And even the details of sentencing, which I'll come back to in a minute, can be also stacked. But it's different when you've got a jury trial. As I've mentioned in previous and other videos, juries, if you have a random pick of jurists, they've got different views. Some think the law is sacrosanct, others not, and back and forth. So the idea that you could get quick unanimous verdicts is near impossible. But yet these ideological crimes are able to get this is all across the Western world, by the way, not just in the United States. These ideological crimes or non-crimes, crimes that aren't defined, they're able to achieve unanimous jury verdicts very quickly. And I don't know how they're able to do that if they aren't picking the jurors well in advance and nobbling the lawyers on the other side in the defense. So let's have a little look at that. And in the case of the Trump trial, the prosecution hadn't really identified a crime. If there was a crime, it was a bookkeeping error. So, and which is some minor misdemeanor, which had through the statute of limitations had expired anyway. So what the prosecution did was they attached an ideological crime of possible intent and determined ideologically, and so we'll put that bookkeeping misdemeanor with a possible ideological intent. And if we put the two together and we put it into the martini shaker, we can come up with an alleged crime. I mean, really, drawing a very long bow here, and only a politically motivated prosecutor would pick it up and run with it. Now, I don't know, maybe it's coincidence, but a number of people from the globalist controlled Justice Department, FBI, CIA type, they went over to work in Alvin Bragg's office at the same time as they were cooking up these charges. So there could be no doubt, including one of the White House insiders. So there can be no doubt that there was, it was obviously a political hit job. Let's say, unless that was the most stunning coincidence ever seen in political history or legal political history. So it's obviously a political hit job, and so they could easily get an activist judge and stick him in there. That wouldn't have been hard. Various other activists in the process that again could have easily been put together. And the political machine and someone could have run protection and cover for them. The media was obviously running aggressive protection and cover for them. So they were able to go after Trump now, but the sort of the uncertainty, and these people do not like uncertainty. The globalists do not like uncertainty. Uncertainty is something they will not tolerate. The uncertainty would be a jury. Now, if you just rando pick a whole bunch of jurors, and you've got such a flimsy case, then how do you know that you're going to get the verdict you want? And given it's a political hit job and planned quite meticulously at a number of levels, media coordination, White House and Justice Department insiders working on it and so on. When you've got that, when you put that much effort and time, Alvin Bragg, he's too much of a fucking moron to bring a charge for spitting on the sidewalk. So he's not the linchpin in this. Far from it. He's just the boy they've stuck out front. And so anyway, so they were able to get reasonably quickly a unanimous guilty verdict on these incredibly vague bookkeeping error, ideological crimes. Now, Is that even possible? But as we look at a number of cases all over the Western world, somebody misgenders somebody. You didn't use the correct pronoun, and they can actually drag someone into court for that, and get a jury to unanimously say it was a hate crime. How do you do that? I mean, not many people are actually going to agree that it's something worth taking to court or to agree it's a hate crime. But yet they can get 12 jurors to come back quickly and unanimously. Yep, hate crime. And the list goes on. There's a case in Britain where somebody was going around saying it's okay to be white. Hardly a hate crime, you'd think, but the British Prosecutors Department went after this with a great vengeance. Now, if you go down the main street of London calling for the genocide of the Jews, that's okay. But you put out a leaflet saying it's okay to be white, and that's it. The full force of the law is coming after you. They're all over it, and so now they raided this guy's place, and because he had some history books about Europe in the 1930s, World War II, that sort of stuff, and that had like photographs of Hitler in it. I mean, it was about World War II, for fuck's sake, and he was one of the central characters of that time. And so they could say, well, look, he's got all these images of swastikas. Look at him. Look, he's a fucking Nazi. And they put the guy in prison for a few years, and they've actually doubled down, putting very tight controls over whether he can see his family at all, or whether they're allowed to come to the prison to see him. I mean, it's insane that they're treating him like his human rights are being absolutely shat upon. And where are all the human rights groups that when you get some brown or black guy who's committed multiple murders and homicides, suddenly he's got real human rights issues, right to a family life. But where are all the human rights people climbing all over this? They're nowhere in sight. And this because he's a straight white guy, it's just, and he opposes globalization, whereas supporting the human rights of the black murderer, then that is socially destabilizing, and therefore they want that's supported. Whereas the white guy complaining about white people being replaced, that's now a crime. But again, they got reasonably quickly 12 jurors to say no, he's guilty. And numerous other cases I can look at, and I went to look on how quickly, doing a search on it, how many of these cases are brought. Not all of them are given mass media attention, but there's a lot of these cases around where they can get quick unanimous verdicts. Now, I just don't believe that's possible. Now, let me go back a little bit. Certainly when I was a very young man, jury duty was considered to be, was viewed with great solemnity. You had a public duty to your fellow citizens to be just, upright, and true, and all, you had to listen intently and carefully to the evidence. If you didn't understand something or you didn't know, you would ask, but you had to be meticulous in your and the facts are what mattered. Tested evidence, and I've mentioned this before as a case where a car had. So somebody ran out on the road and they'd been hit by a car, and then the next car to come along, not the car that had knocked the pedestrian down, but the next car to come along, somebody came around the corner and saw the car go, and they said that car had knocked the person down, because that's what it looked like from the angle that they had at the time they came to look, and they said as much under oath. But when they were properly cross-examined and the evidence was tested in court, independent court of law, by the way, then they were found to, well, no, you're actually mistaken. But they'd sworn it under oath that they had seen the car knock the guy down, the pedestrian down, when in fact it wasn't. It was the next car after the one that had knocked the pedestrian down. And so the judge pointed out that just that little error, that small error, could have ended up with an innocent man going to prison had that evidence been accepted. It was only the diligence of the defense lawyer that picked up the difference there. So the judge threatened this person with imprisonment for committing perjury under oath because you did not see the car knock the guy down, the pedestrian down. You saw the car driving over the body. That's what you saw. And that little difference there, maybe even a trick of the imagination, so that little difference there could have ended up being pivotal evidence that decided whether somebody went to prison or didn't. And the judge seriously castigated the person because they had not seen something that they said they'd seen. It was perjury in a court of law, and this was considered sinful, let alone inaccurate. But those days those days are clearly long gone. But even a few years later, I remember a work colleague was called into jury duty, and they were made chairman of the jury, or four-person, whatever they called it, foreman, and they took it very seriously. And when they were done with the jury duty, and he was back at work, he was talking about, it was actually a murder case. He was talking about that there were those in the jury room that didn't want to have to stay in the jury. Well, why don't we just all agree on something, anything, it doesn't matter, then we can all go home. So there were those there, and he was talking about, there were those there that had that view. Why should we give a fuck about this guy? Let's just all go home. And there were people, I didn't like the look of his face, he must be guilty. Things like that. But this guy, again, he was a work colleague. He took the view, and there were others in there, as he explained it. He took the view that they had to go over the evidence carefully because their decision would decide whether or not an innocent man, went to prison or a guilty man didn't. And so the stakes were very high. They had to do everything they could to be accurate and thorough and so on. But not everyone in the jury room thought that way. Again, there was something, I didn't like the look of the guy. But anyway, this guy stayed, so he claims, stayed there and did it. Now, knowing him as I did, I can imagine he would be like that, and he would seek to be accurate. And he was your classic good sort of straight white middle class guy and everything. So they stayed and gave, I can't remember what the verdict was, by the way, but that he stayed, and he's no, we're going to have to stay here. Now, even when he got back, I remember his boss was complaining, well, couldn't you have at least made a decision a bit more quickly? We missed you, because he was gone for 4 or 5 work days, something in that order. So it was, and so the boss was giving him not so much a hard time. It was more, well, couldn't you have just made a decision? I mean, who cares about that guy? So there are those in the community that find it inconvenient, or why bother? Why should you give a fuck about someone else's situation? Why put time into this? Who cares either way? So there are those people out there that think like that, and maybe they've got pressing issues. Maybe the person on the jury's got, I don't know, sick relatives that they're looking after. There can be other things there as well, so they're keen to get away. So I want to look after my sick relatives, so why don't we just send that guy to prison? That's okay with me. So there are those who have that view. Now, juries used to be selected from the local village or the local town or where you lived. So they had a duty to each other, a duty to their fellow citizens, a duty to the accused, a duty to the aggrieved parties, and so on. That was very much a community based. That was the whole idea. You will be judged by your peers, not by people from people who maybe know you by. It's different now, because in those days there was obviously no such thing as television or radio or anything like that. There was no internet, so the spread, or if you like, the geographical spread of your understanding was always your local area, whereas now it's national and international and so on. So very different. There are many other influences on your views and opinions than there would have been, of course, back in the days before mass communication. So juries were built really for that sort of circumstance. Now, nonetheless, how do you get a jury? I personally think it would be impossible to get 12 jurors in a jury room and have them make a unanimous decision unless the facts were absolutely no question, smoking guns left, right, and centre, and there was nothing to discuss. The details were crystal clear. So in that situation, it's possible, of course, to get a jury with unanimous decisions quickly. But when it's very murky, very ideological, very unclear what was done, if anything, then how you would get a unanimous jury, I don't know. Similarly, if it's an ideological crime, I mean, can you actually get 12 jurors to agree unanimously that misgendering someone is a serious hate crime? And it should be brought to court and have a 2 or 3 day trial over it? Can you actually get 12 people to agree on that? I think that would be very hard. I certainly wouldn't. Now, there's another element to this, that the law should be used to punish people that you don't like. I remember years ago, I was, as a fairly youngish supervisor, a couple of people came to me and said, look, Billy Bob down the back there, he's done this and done that, and and very serious. And being inexperienced and young and acting on that advice or acting on their claims, I fired Billy Bob. And Billy Bob wasn't like a particularly good worker anyway, so it wasn't like he was a sterling worker. But on that, I fired. I wasn't very good about it. I didn't feel good about it. I thought there's something not right about this, but I did it because there was a rule in that company that if those particular crimes, if you will, that guy committed, if you didn't act on them, that you could get fired. So it was something that was in my mind at the time. But not that long. Sometime later, we were at some bar or pub, whatever it was, and one of the guys who come to me and said Billy Bob did came, was talking. And he admitted that he and the other guy had conspired to make up the whole story of Billy Bob. Billy Bob hadn't done those things. They just made it all up. It was purely invented. And I remember sort of almost feeling sick in the stomach about that at the time, having quite serious views about right and wrong and all that sort of stuff. But I said I remember saying to the guy, why would you completely make up and fabricate a story? And the guy said, I just didn't like him. What, that makes it okay? I didn't make the decision to fire him. You did. You didn't have to do it. So he made out that it was, or tried to infer that, hey, I just had a go at I made an effort to undermine him, and it worked out. And maybe it didn't. Maybe you could have told us to get lost or not believed it. But anyway, if the guy had come to me just one out, I probably wouldn't have believed it, or would have wanted further evidence. But because the two of them came to me and looking very earnest, and this is really worrying us. But it turns out it was all a lie, all a complete fabrication. And I fired someone on the basis of their information, and was very, have to this day have been rather concerned. Not simply that firing the guys in, but the level of deceit that people will go to get at someone they don't like. Now, recently there was a case in Australia where somebody was put in prison for something they clearly didn't do, and it was overturned on appeal. But and I was talking to somebody about who's involved in the legal profession, by the way, and they weren't that happy about it. But they sort of said, well, a lot of people didn't like him. He's a pretty arrogant guy, so he kind of got what was coming to him. What? You mean you put people in prison for something they didn't do because you think they're arrogant? I mean, is that where we're at today? But that seems to be reflecting, even I would suggest, elite opinion today. Now, coming to the Trump trial, for something, crimes and misdemeanors that vague, remember they've attached a bookkeeping error that the statute of limitations ran out on anyway, and they've attached an ideological thing. Well, his intent was to do such and such, and we don't really have to prove that. We just have to assert it, and then we can put these two together and again put it in the martini shaker, and hey presto, we've got a crime there that we say is a crime. Now, when you look at the media and the commentators and the talking heads running around, well, the jury has spoken. It's not us. We didn't do it. It was the jury. The jury has spoken. This is the fairest trial ever. No trial in human history has ever been this fair. Now, you notice when they rigged the 2020 election, it was the election with the most integrity ever. It was the most secure election ever. So you know when they start saying these things that the reality is the opposite. So given this incredible ability that the globalists have acquired to find quick unanimous verdicts from juries, we have to accept that the juries are hand-picked beforehand, and that it's all arranged and pre-arranged, tapped out, like they pre-arranged with the media on the cover stories and the talking points, like they pre-arranged with the prosecutors to bring certain charges, they pre-arranged with the judge to make sure the right judge hears the case, and so on. So these people do not like uncertainty, and they want to have guaranteed outcomes. That's very much their MO. So you can't get guaranteed outcomes unless you control the jury. Now you've got a problem when the jurors come up, because you've got your defense attorneys that are so no, I don't like this guy or that guy or this one or that one, and so you get a wild card effect where the jurors you want may not get picked. So it's only you have to pick all the jurors, the whole pool of jurors that turn up. You'll have some in there that you'll pick that will disqualify themselves, saying, no, I can't be impartial. And so they will openly state it. So then they can easily be put to one side. But they're just there as plants. They're not there as real jurors anyway. They're just there as part of the theatre, part of the show, part of the choreography. So, you've got your hand-picked jurors, who will decide as now how you get the hand-picked juror, whether you pick ideological fanatics who say, hey, it's okay to subvert the justice, it's okay to commit perjury, it's okay to convict innocent people for ideological reasons. For example, if you look at the talk shows after the Trump case, and this intrigues me, because you see it all over now, where they say, well, look, it doesn't really matter whether he committed those crimes or not. That's not really the issue. We know that ideologically he's guilty. I mean, look what he said about migrants from the Middle East. Look what he said about migrants from South America. So he's just a bad, guilty guy, a racist, or da da da. So it doesn't matter whether he committed these crimes. He's guilty, ideologically guilty anyway, and it's just whatever we choose to pin on him. That's the only thing that matters. And there are people there that are accepting, people out there, a lot of them too, by the way, who are accepting of that, or claim to be, and saying, well, it doesn't matter if someone's guilty. Ideologically they're bad, therefore we can pin any crime on them, or invent any crime, accuse them of anything, and that becomes merely the button we push to punish them. But ideologically they're ready, or they should be punished anyway. So clearly there are those out there that think that way, and I've come across them here in Australia. They say, hey, it's okay, someone's ideologically guilty, so we can pin any crime. And you see this increasingly all across the legal profession, particularly where you get any gender or race conflict. Well, white people are racist, therefore, whatever you say, you intended to be evil, therefore we will imprison you for that ideologically, even though you actually didn't do anything. Well, in the case of, gender conflict stuff, rape and so on, well, we all know that you're an oppressor and a misogynist and a patriarchal, therefore you're already ideologically guilty when you come into the court. So there's a huge amount of prejudice that's already ideologically in place, that someone is ideologically guilty of, and therefore you're just looking for some cheap, sleazy excuse to punish them for being ideologically on the wrong side of things. Now, whether you can get a whole jury, I don't think you can get a whole jury to do that if you're random, but if you're picking a jury Now, it doesn't matter whether you're bribing them or promising them this or threatening them with that. It doesn't really matter. But it can be done. And I've no doubt now that they're, given the amount of effort that the Braggs and the hangers-on and those people have said, well, the jury has spoken. The jury. Then I'm now convinced. Before that, I wasn't. I thought possibly an accident or so, but now I'm convinced that that jury was handpicked beforehand and that it was all choreographed, set up. Now we have to then look at Trump's lawyers. How did this setup get past Trump's lawyers? Now, if the entire jury pool was either people who would brazenly disqualify themselves, leaving only a core of people to be picked, maybe 20 odd people in there, they're like the standby jurors and everything. Then how did they go about that? There's a paper trail somewhere, there's evidence somewhere. So a rigorous examination of the jury selection process. Remember the operatives and the administrators within the court system, the ones that will send out the jury invitations or the jury requests. Those people are also a part of the process. They also have been got at, and they're also partisans. So it goes deep and wide. So there needs to be an absolutely rigorous examination of all communications, texts, everything. I mean, really going through this. And I'm convinced that what they'll find is that it's a completely stacked jury, and the whole thing was predetermined, and the case itself and the supposed evidence wasn't there to examine evidence. It was there purely to humiliate Trump and to force he had to be there every day to humiliate Trump and to also send a message to working class America. You think this guy is your hero? You think he's going to save you from us? Well, look what we can do to him. We can do anything we want to him, and we can do that to you as well. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.